Hello and welcome back. Okay, so this is the Dinky ME109 or BF109, made between 72 and 75. It's a Dinky 726. There you go, you can see it says Dinky and Messerschmitt. Okay, so as you can see there's a switch on these and it's missing, so that's a problem. And you'll find that there's also a missing motor, missing aerial, but otherwise it's actually quite complete really, and it's in the desert camouflage that Dinky came out with. But obviously if you're going to be a model aeroplane pedant, you're going to say it doesn't have a tropical filter on it, but anyway, as you can see there's no motor because you can see there's no spindle. So what we'll do is we'll open it up and have a look. So as usual it's one flat blade screwdriver will do the job, and we'll open it up and see what we've got inside. And we all knew there would be nothing. Now part of the reason for this is that the getting the battery in and out of the plane would actually lift the switch and the motor out, so eventually someone will get bored and just basically drop the bits on the floor and lose them. I think it's what was the general fate on these, I think. And unlike on the Zero, the 109 has a separate metal component to keep the undercarriage up and down, so that's all okay. So basically apart from missing parts, we're doing quite well here. So what we'll do now is we'll prise out the cockpit canopy and the air intake, and we'll separate those off into a safe box. And we'll just have a look at the canopy to see what state it's in. I'm surprised it hasn't gotten smashed or lost by now, to be quite honest. So there you go, it is more or less in one piece. The clippy bit at the back is broken, so we'll have to do a bit of super glue on that. But I thought it'd be nice to try and keep this rather than just get another one. It is quite scratched, but I think that'll just add to the character of it. Okay, so we need to source a motor. So what I've done is I've gone to eBay and I've bought something called a job lot. Now a job lot is basically you get some wrecked vehicles, and generally they're all completely knackered. So in this case we've got a Land Rover, a transit van and a helicopter, and these cost £3. Okay, so job lots are a good source of spares or vehicles that you might want to have a real challenge with. So in this case we've got all the doors of the Land Rover, we've got an interior, and its glazing's more or less okay, but the bodywork's shot and the axles are gone. And obviously we don't have a bonnet. We do have the tailgate though, so often those get broke off, so we could use this as a donor for another vehicle maybe. So anyway, so there you go, so that costs say £1. Now we've got a transit van, which you may have recognised from another video. And it's very beat up and it's missing parts, and none of the doors are there. Right, focus. And there's something missing in the back. I can't think what it is, but I think we all know. So we've got an axle. Now a Sea King helicopter, and the Sea King helicopter has something we want. That's right. This has an electric motor, which is the same as everything else Dinky uses. And Sea King helicopters appear to be very unloved on the used market, so they're quite common. I think they came in a few different sets, and they use the same motor. So guess what we're going to do? That's right. We're going to strip this of its motor, and hopefully the motor's good, and we'll be getting our 109 flying again. Now obviously this helicopter has been left with its battery in it and it's rotted, so it may be the motor's no good because it'll be full of gunge. But the last helicopter that I broke up, it didn't have a tail. There's only half a helicopter, but the motor in it was perfect. So anyway, this one feels quite rough, so I'm a bit worried about it. So we'll have to have a look at it. And also the tabs on the end of the motor have been tampered with. You can tell they've been bent up and put back down again, so we don't have a problem here. So anyway, so we've gained some screws and a motor. Okay, so before we tackle that, we'll just get the main halves of the aircraft stripped. As you can see, we're going to try and leave the wheels on again and see if we can get away with it. Okay. Okay, so again, we were able to strip the aircraft without having to remove the wheels, which was quite good. The camouflage half of the aircraft stripped rapidly, but the blue paint that they used in the lower half, must be all that 70s asbestos, resisted being stripped a little bit, so it took a little bit of physical force to get that paint off, but it came off. Okay, so it all stripped off quite nicely, so we'll just run the wire wheel over the whole thing just to sort of get any loose bits off, but otherwise it'll come up all nice and shiny. There you go. Who needs paint? Something very therapeutic about that. Anyway, so obviously in doing this as well, we'll be getting off the loose, and also sort of keying the surface a little bit as well, because inevitably in polishing you're kind of like scratching it ever so subtly. So we'll move on to the next stage. Okay, so we're just going to spray some primer on our nice glossy metal 109. And you may notice I'm using a glove half-heartedly again. So this is the usual Tamiya primer. I think car primer, acrylic primer is probably just as good, to be quite honest. And it's a bit cheaper, I think. Okay, so again, really just looking to provide a key for the paint, not looking to put an absolutely perfect layer of paint on. Okay, so this weird piece of plastic is actually the switch that I've ordered off eBay. And as you can see, basically, you're just moving the connection in between the motor and the battery and breaking it, basically, just by pushing it sideways. So it's a very simple mechanism, but what it means is the motor and the battery kind of hook into that switch. So if you're a bit clumsy pulling the battery out, you can actually break the switch off, which is probably what most kids of a certain age would have done, to be honest. Now this model uses a AAA battery. It doesn't use the N battery, which say the Spitfire did. As you can see, it's just too short. Alright, so you just use a conventional AAA battery. And I presume Dinky may have made the change on the battery technology just for the sake of people not being able to get hold of these N batteries because they're quite expensive. Now, AAA batteries, well, even back in the 70s, weren't that cheap. I mean, batteries are very cheap now, but they weren't then, even so, in real terms at all. So you can see the difference in the size between them anyway. Now, having got the whole thing assembled, we gave it a quick go, and lo and behold, it wouldn't run. So basically, I think we've got a little bit of a problem with our motor. So basically, I've pried up the tabs again, and we'll just pop it up and have a look to see what the problem is. Because I've done a continuity test with the multimeter, and it's definitely not picking up when you rotate it. So, and there you go. Right, so straight off, we'll just take the rotor out, and you can see it's a bit dirty. Though it's not that bad. I think focus. Mind over matter. Oh, honestly. If Richard Attenborough have these problems. Now, can you see? There you go. So, basically it's dirty, but it's alright. It's not ripped up or anything like that. But as I took it apart, I could see what the real problem with this is. Somebody's had this apart in the past, and they've bent the wires of the contacts onto the commutator. So basically we're going to have to, as well as them being covered in crud, but they're a bit bent, so we're going to have to straighten that out with a pair of tweezers. Now, believe it or not, that is actually an improvement of what it was, but as I say, these things are so hair fine, I think once you get them bent, you'll never get them straight again. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to give the commutator and the contacts are clean, and this server sol stuff is brilliant. Don't use WD-40, guys. Unless you're absolutely in an emergency. You can clean contacts with WD-40, but I wouldn't recommend it. People do it, but I wouldn't recommend it. This stuff's way better. This will bring things back from the dead. Okay, so basically, focus, there you go. So we're just going to give the commutator and the contacts a buzz with this, and then we'll reassemble the motor. Quick spray. There you go. So what we'll do is we'll move on. So here I'm just testing that as you turn the rotor, the contacts move up and down on the copper foil, which they are doing. It's a bit hard to show on camera there. And obviously I'm getting the goo everywhere, but that stuff dries off, so don't worry about it. And then we'll just pop the whole thing back in its container carefully. And just checking continuity with the multimeter, and now we're getting, basically it should go on and off as it goes round. So like it spends less time on than it does off. So okay, so we've got everything back together, reassembled, and we'll give it a flick and see if it works, which it should by rights. Just showing how the whole thing looks inside. We're in the on position. Yay! All cheer. Okay. It's not too bad, is it? So we've got that going. On to the next step. Now, as in the previous aircraft are done, I think it's totally recommended putting in a earth between the motor and the battery's negative terminal, because obviously once you paint the aeroplane, you're ruining the earthing between the casing of the motor and the actual case of the aircraft, the structure of the aircraft. So I'm just soldering that on. Obviously I'm not in any way pretending I'm the world's greatest solderer, but it works. See, so every now and again, if you don't do it properly, it'll be dry. So what I'll do now is I'll actually file a little patch on the side of the motor, and then I'll solder it again, and it will take this time. So I'm just soldering onto the wire of the negative terminal, and this will guarantee a good earth between the motor and the battery. Okay, so just refitting the two halves back together with all the innards in place. I've noticed that when you put the thing back together again, the battery is actually a bit of a tight fit, so that's quite interesting. So you have to give the thing a bit of a squeeze before you can actually get screwed together again. Now for this aircraft I'm going to paint it up like the Airfix 1/72 scale BF109e. What I'm doing as well is I'm going to pinch the transfers out of this kit and use it on this model. And the reason I'm doing that is basically I'm a bit skint at the moment, and I'd like to actually do a custom job on this kit at some point in the future, so I was going to get a different set of transfers for it anyway, I'll make some up. So for now, for the sake of a bit of laziness frankly, I'm going to pinch the transfers out of this and its paint scheme, and we'll see what it looks like. So I'm just painting the underside of the aircraft and the sides in hellblau. I think I'll show us how you pronounce it. I've forgotten the RLM colour for that, but it's that kind of bluey grey colour that the Luftwaffe used. And yes, as is traditional for me, I start off with good intentions using a glove, and eventually I have to clear a blockage or something in the brush, and I have to take the glove off and I forget about it. So there you go. I'm an idiot. Okay, and then what we'll do next is we'll mask up the plane for its camouflage scheme. Okay, so I was going to start off with painting this in green on the upper surfaces, and then I was going to paint with black green as the next colour. So like a green and a black green camouflage scheme. Okay, then we're going to start masking up the plane again to do the overlaying colour pattern. Now as I was painting this, I was thinking this wouldn't be like enough of a contrast for the style of the model. So I decided when this had dried, I then decided to overpaint it in a sort of kind of like an ocean grey. Okay, so as I've done previously on a couple of the other models, painting the canopy by hand, and if I go over the edges, I'm not going to get too worried about it, because what I'll do is, because this is acrylic paint, I can then just scratch it off with a cocktail stick up to the edges of the frames. Although admittedly some of the frames aren't very well defined on the moulding, they're kind of more suggested, and there aren't enough of them obviously, but even so. I think it'll be a little bit of an improvement on the original design by Dinky, I think. In my humble opinion, that is. Now the canopy is very damaged. I was kind of debating whether or not to keep it or not, but anyway, we'll see how we get on. So what I'm doing here is I'm just painting the edges of the canopy, and that kind of tries to kill off that sort of illumination you get through the sides of the plastic. So here we're just taking the masking tape off carefully, but we'll speed it up quite a bit, just to see how it's come out, which won't be too bad. I think we only had like 2 little spots where paint lifted, and a couple of little bleeds, and so these will be touched up by hand. And to be quite honest, the thing with these Vallejo paints is that you can apply them by the brush, and they do finish very well. You know, they're very good paints. Okay, so we're going to use the Airfix transfers now. I'm going to use some microsol to soften things up, and it's quite a simple model to do. There's only a few rough markings and squadron markings put on, and that's it really. So we'll do the wing crosses first. So the transfers are soaked in water until they start to move around on the paper. Then they're transferred onto the model carefully. There you go, they're just getting them going. So that microsol has been used, and we're just using a bit of water to help float them a little bit, getting lined up. So you see, I'm using the microsol, don't worry. Don't panic, Mr. Mennerig. Just doing the other wing one. Now obviously Dinky's kind of made these little squares on the wings to sort of basically, this is where they go. Now this model isn't as nicely detailed I think as the Zero. I think the Zero is the best detailed model. I think it's actually quite good, whereas this is like a bit cruder, it has to be said. And obviously to fit the motor in, they've had to give the 109 a bit of a weight issue. Okay, so then we're going to put the squadron markings on. Now I should have put these slightly further forward on the fuselage, but they sort of locked in place so rapidly I had to commit myself to where I put them. Right, just fitting the fuselage cross. And just gently sliding it off onto the plane, and then we'll get our microsol on there to help reposition and to soften it up. Now I'm going to paint the aerial by hand, whilst at the same time just touching up some areas in the masking. I'll do it all in one go, so I thought I'd get the transfers on first, and then we'll do the touching up. Now we'll put on the squadron shield. Just gently slide it off. Sticks to your finger, typical, isn't it? And then we'll just straighten that up using a bit of water and microsol, and then we'll repeat that for the other side. Right, we're just going to put the propeller on, which we've already painted up black, you may notice. Dinky do give you little markings on the end of the props to actually paint them yellow or something. Now obviously that kind of looks better when they're going, because you can sort of see the yellow trace behind them, but as was mentioned to me before, Luftwaffe didn't do that, although they do it on one plane for some weird reason. I read that somewhere on Wikipedia. Anyway, so on it goes. Yes, I just forgot here I'd switched it off. There you go, first time. No dicky carburettor on this one. Okay, shall we take this to the turntable and see how it looks? Obviously the touching up will be done now, but I'll spare you that because that's a bit boring. Okay, so here we have our 109, painted up in a bit more Battle of Britain looking paint scheme. We got ourselves a new motor, to quote Alexi Sale, and we used the markings from an Airfix kit, which I think looked a little bit better than the ones that you get from the original Dinky and the aftermarkets, I think, to be quite honest. So there you go, it's not too bad, it's not too shabby. So, if you've liked what you've seen, give us a like. By all means comment. If you didn't like it, press dislike twice, by all means. And I'll see you in the next video. And if you're interested, hold on, and I'll show you a little bit of memorabilia from the Battle of Britain that I've got. Okay, speak to you soon. Now, back in the early 70s, us kids used to play games with football cards. Does anyone remember those? Used to get them with chewing gum or stick them in a book. But you used to sort of do a little gambling game with them. Anyway, I'd accrued a couple of shopping bags of cards because I wasn't too bad at the game, but I had no interest in football. But one of the kids I knew at school knew I liked aeroplanes. So basically I traded a shopping bag of football cards for 1.5 sets of Battle of Britain trading cards, which I've never seen since or before. So the cards would include stills from the film on one side. There you go, there's a Spitfire. And on the back there would be newspapers from the day, or information about the Battle of Britain, or a map, or information on the aeroplanes, etc. So they were quite an interesting little set of cards. Yeah, I think they were all from the Daily Mirror now, looking back on it. So I don't know if that was like some sort of sponsorship deal or something, I don't know. Here we go now, some of the cards have got pictures of the aircraft. So in this case these are the Me-109s, but obviously they're from the Spanish Air Force, so not really properly, and they've got Merlin engines, so that's why they look weird. Anyway, so more news stories, another one. Hispania Aviación, is that how you say it? With stirring news titles. There's more of those. That's a proper aeroplane, at long last. And these silly Spitfires have a proper Hurricane. There you go, have a Spitfire just to make them feel better. Okay, so basically that's the set of cards that I got from someone from school a long time ago. So I don't know, it might be loads of people have got these, I don't know, but I've never seen any. So I thought they were kind of interesting, and I thought I'd show them to you. Anyway, so thanks for looking, for indulging me, and see you again soon.